Jumping straight into it, Steelers fans, the truth is the energy in Pittsburgh has never been hotter. Every week the pressure rises, the narratives multiply, and, as always, there are people on the outside trying to tell the story of this team without actually watching what happens on the field. And that's where the problem starts. Over the past few weeks, voices have popped up saying the Steelers have no run game, that the offense depends entirely on the quarterback, as if the heavy lifting in this unit came from just one player. That's the kind of take you get from someone who watches 2 games and thinks they've understood the whole season. But anyone following the full body of work knows the Pittsburgh Steelers can run the football, and they run it well. They've proven it over and over. We've seen 160-yard rushing games, big yards per carry from Jaylen Warren, balance from Gainwell, all conveniently ignored by those who prefer ready-made narratives. So buckle up, because this video is just getting started, and before we dive in, smash that like button and show the world that the black and gold nation always shows up. These last 2 games weren't about a broken run game, they were about trusting Aaron Rodgers to take over when the matchups demanded it. And he delivered, especially against Baltimore, where his accuracy and command were the backbone of the win. But what's been lost in the chatter is the simple reality that Pittsburgh hasn't abandoned the run because it doesn't work. They've just leaned into Rodgers' arm when it made sense. And when the run game is fed again, the numbers show it's far more efficient than it was last season, when the Steelers were bottom 5 in nearly every meaningful rushing metric. This year it's different. This year there's balance, explosiveness, and the potential to peak at the exact moment contenders need to. And the offense isn't the only group setting itself up for a strong finish. The defense, quietly, is getting healthier and more capable as January approaches. Derek Harmon has been a massive component of that run-stopping identity, and the splits with and without him are staggering. When he plays, they allow nearly 100 fewer rushing yards per game. If he's back this week, or at worst against the Lions in Week 16, you're talking about getting one of the most important pieces of the entire defensive structure back right as the playoff push reaches its peak. Combine that with the secondary tightening up, Pierre and Eccles settling into their roles, Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar anchoring the back end, and Joey Porter Jr. continuing to look like one of the most dependable man coverage corners in football, and suddenly the defense that felt disconnected early in the year looks like a unit ready to surge. And maybe the most interesting part is what's happening inside the locker room. The outside noise, the criticism of Mike Tomlin, the constant debates about his job security, the weekly national media storylines, hasn't fractured this team. According to Ben Roethlisberger, it's done the opposite. Big Ben said that this kind of pressure is exactly what brings a team together late in the season. And he's right. You can feel it. You can see it. The players aren't tuning it out. They're using it. Cam Hayward made that clear when he said players have to own the criticism directed at Tomlin because they want him around. The message was simple. If you want to silence the noise, win. That kind of accountability is rare in today's NFL, and it tells you something important. This locker room isn't just defending Tomlin publicly, they're playing for him privately. Then you have Alex Highsmith, who didn't hesitate to put the team's goals on full display. He said the mission is a Super Bowl, not sneaking into the playoffs, not hoping to make a run, a Super Bowl. And he didn't say it with empty bravado. He pointed to the leadership in the building, the trust in the locker room, and the urgency that's at an all-time high. He talked about the team understanding what's ahead, understanding the mistakes of last year's late-season collapse, and refusing to repeat it. And when he spoke about Tomlin, he echoed what the rest of the locker room has been hinting at. The steady leadership, the consistency, the calm presence that keeps this team from fracturing when adversity hits. And honestly, when you look at everything together, the improved rushing efficiency, the passing attack finding its rhythm with Rodgers, the injection of Adam Thielen and MVS, the defensive reinforcements returning at the perfect time, the locker room uniting behind its head coach, you can feel something shifting. This isn't last year's team stumbling to the finish line. This feels like a group gearing up for its best football when it matters most. The question now is whether that momentum will translate into the postseason and whether the Steelers can truly overcome the inconsistency that defined the early part of the year. So as we head into the most important stretch of the season, I want to know what you think. Do you believe this Steelers team is coming together at the right time? Or are you still skeptical that they can put it all together when it matters most? Picking up right where we left off, the most fascinating part of this Steelers season isn't just the improvements on the field. It's how the organization is positioning itself for the future while still pushing for a playoff run right now. And that brings us to the draft conversations that have started swirling, especially with ESPN's Field Yates and PFF's Trevor Sigma releasing their early 2026 mock drafts. What stood out in both projections wasn't randomness or speculation, it was a shared understanding of what this offense has lacked behind DK Metcalf and how critical that missing piece has become. Field Yates had the Steelers taking USC's My Lemon at number 20, and if you watched even a handful of his games, you understand why that pick would instantly reshape the offense. Yates pointed out something every Steelers fan has noticed all year. outside of DK Metcalf, there hasn't been a receiver who forces defenses to adjust their coverage. Lemon changes that. He's a polished route runner, has one of the best catch radiuses in the entire class, and shows elite ball skills, only 1 drop per season across 3 years. He isn't the stereotypical 6 feet 3 inches burner, but he doesn't need to be. His tape speaks louder than any measurement. A player who consistently beats coverage, wins down the sideline, and elevates his quarterback is exactly the kind of talent Pittsburgh hasn't had behind DK. But then comes Trevor Sigma's projection, Washington's Denzel Boston. A completely different body type, a completely different style of play. And yet, the same conclusion, Pittsburgh needs another dependable receiver, and Boston fits the mold. At 6 feet 4 inches, 210 pounds with fluid movement and an 89.8 receiving grade against man coverage, he gives you something few receivers that size can, separation. Boston's game isn't built on speed, it's built on nuance, technique, body control, and the ability to win physically without slowing down. Pairing him with DK Metcalf would give the Steelers one of the most imposing wide receiver duos in the AFC, and more importantly, it would give Rodgers, or whoever comes next, a target who can be counted on in contested situations. And that's what makes this conversation so interesting. For the first time in a while, the Steelers aren't just fighting for the present, they're preparing for the next phase of their offense. If Rodgers comes back next season, giving him another elite receiver extends Pittsburgh's window. And if Rodgers doesn't return, then you better believe a young quarterback walking into an offense with DK Metcalf plus a first-round receiver would have a far stronger foundation to grow with than most rookies get. The truth is, a move like Lemon or Boston isn't just about 2026, it's about creating continuity for the next half-decade. DK is under contract for 4 more years. A first-round rookie will be under contract for at least 4. That's stability. That's identity. That's how you build an offense that doesn't crumble the moment a quarterback changes. But all of this draft talk sits on top of a bigger story unfolding inside this team, the emotional momentum that Ben Roethlisberger talked about, the unity forged by criticism, and the leadership of Mike Tomlin that players continue to rally behind. You see it in Cam Hayward's comments. You see it in Alex Highsmith's confidence. You even see it in the way the defense anticipates Derek Harmon's return like a missing puzzle piece finally sliding back into place. These aren't disconnected quotes. They are all pieces of the same message. This team believes it can make noise in January. And belief matters, especially when you consider the adversity they've already stared down. 5 of their 6 losses came to teams with at least 9 wins. Their lone bad loss was to Cincinnati, and even then, the offense moved the ball and nearly pulled that out. They've beaten playoff caliber opponents. They've been competitive against the AFC's best. They've taken punches, and instead of folding like last season's late collapse, they've grown sharper. What we're watching right now is a team building momentum, identity, and purpose at the exact moment contenders begin to separate themselves. And whether they take a wide receiver like Lemon or Boston next spring, or whether they take a quarterback or an offensive lineman, the foundation being built today is going to shape what this team becomes tomorrow. But before that future comes the stretch run. And before the draft debates become real decisions, the Steelers have to finish this season with urgency, and according to the locker room leaders, that urgency is higher than ever. So let me wrap this up by turning it over to you. Between my Lemon and Denzel Boston, which receiver would you rather see lining up next to DK Metcalf next year? And more importantly, do you think adding a first-round wideout is the right move, or should the Steelers prioritize a different position altogether? Picking up exactly where we left off, the emergence of this unified locker room and the growing clarity about the Steelers' direction naturally leads into the most important part of this narrative. What all of this actually means for the stretch run that is right in front of them. Because as much as the draft talk has fired up the fan base and as much as the outside media noise has galvanized the players, everything ultimately funnels into one defining question. Can this team peak at the right time and turn potential into results? And that's where the pieces coming together feel different from previous years. Last season, the Steelers were limping toward the finish line. The offense was stalling, the defense was fading, the locker room looked exhausted. Now, it's the opposite. You have an offense that's finding rhythm with Aaron Rodgers, who just played one of his most controlled and precise games of the season against Baltimore. You have Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling injecting reliability and spacing into the passing attack. And you have Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell ready to be reintegrated into the run game once the team shifts back to a more balanced approach. But more than anything, you can feel the confidence growing, not delusion, not false bravado, but genuine confidence built from competing against playoff caliber teams week after week. Look at the quality of their opponents. Look at how close they've been in nearly every one of those games. Look at the fight they've shown, the adjustments they've made, and the ability to rebound after setbacks that could have broken other teams. Even the defense, which many questioned early in the season, is trending upward. The moment Derek Harmon returns, and the numbers don't lie, the run defense immediately tightens. Joey Porter Jr. continues to anchor man coverage like a veteran. Ramsey's presence and Duggar's return give the secondary a completeness it lacked during some of the team's most difficult stretches. Pierre and Eccles are settling in. Everything is aligning at once. And defensively, maybe they aren't the number one unit they were projected to be before the season began, but they have the potential to be a top 10 playoff caliber defense when it matters. And in January, that matters more than anything. But the heartbeat of this team isn't the scheme or the numbers, it's the leadership. The words from Big Ben, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, and others weren't empty noise. They reflected a group that has taken ownership of its flaws, its identity, and its goals. Highsmith didn't hesitate to say the target is the Super Bowl. He didn't dance around it or try to play it safe. He said the urgency is at an all-time high and that the team's leadership is setting the tone. You don't hear that from a team that's guessing about who they are. You hear that from a team that feels the shift happening around them and believes they're capable of something bigger than what outsiders expect. And that's why Mike Tomlin's leadership has become such a focal point. Because when the outside noise grows the loudest, the players aren't distancing themselves from him, they're circling around him. They're defending him, playing for him, and holding themselves accountable for the criticism thrown his way. That doesn't happen in dysfunctional organizations. That doesn't happen with coaches players don't trust. The bond between Tomlin and his locker room is a real advantage, especially heading into the most mentally demanding part of the season. So as the Steelers prepare for the final stretch, with the Dolphins next on the schedule and the margin for error shrinking, there's a sense that everything is converging at the right moment. The offense is more balanced than outsiders give it credit for. The defense is getting healthy at the perfect time. The draft future looks promising. The locker room is unified, and the urgency inside the building is higher than ever. Now it's about turning all of that into results. It's about showing the league that this team isn't just resilient, they're dangerous. And it's about proving that the noise, the doubts, and the narratives were never stronger than the belief inside this roster. And with all of that said, I want to hear from you right now. With the Steelers entering the most important part of their season, what is your confidence level in this team finishing strong and making real noise in the postseason? Let me know in the comments, smash the like button, subscribe for more, and check out the next video on your screen. Picking up the momentum and driving it forward, there's one more layer to this Steelers story that deserves real attention, the psychological transformation happening inside this team as the pressure rises. Because when a roster starts believing it can outperform the noise, when leaders start speaking openly about expectations, and when a team begins stacking real evidence on the field, that's when something dangerous starts to form, conviction. You've seen it building week after week, even in games they didn't finish the way they wanted. You've seen Rodgers challenge the offense to raise its standard. You've seen the defensive leaders call out the lack of consistency and then respond by tightening up in critical moments. And as small as it sounds, you can see it in the body language, guys celebrating each other, the sideline staying engaged, veterans keeping younger players locked in. These aren't the signs of a team unraveling under pressure. These are the signs of a team hardening. And it matters, because the stretch ahead isn't subtle. The Dolphins matchup isn't just another game, it's a temperature check on how real this surge actually is. Miami forces you to tackle in space. They force your secondary to communicate. They force your offense to score and sustain drives. And for the Steelers, this is exactly the kind of game that reveals who they are becoming rather than who they were in September or October. You can't fake your identity against a team like Miami. You either rise to the moment or get exposed. And this locker room knows that. The fascinating part is how different the energy is from this time last season. A year ago, the Steelers were dragging themselves through late December, visibly running out of ideas and answers. Now, they look like a group sharpening itself with each passing week. Rodgers' timing with his receivers is accelerating. Warren and Gainwell are fresh enough to give the run game a second wind. The defense is days away from being the healthiest it has been in months. And the players themselves, not the coaches, not the media, are the ones pushing the message of urgency and accountability. That's what makes the Tomlin dynamic so important. For all the criticism he takes, and for all the debates that swirl around his future every year, it's impossible to ignore that his players rally for him when the outside world doesn't. Cam Hayward didn't dodge anything when he said the team has to own the noise pointed at Tomlin. Highsmith didn't hesitate to praise Tomlin's calm leadership. Even the younger guys speak about him with a level of respect you don't hear in every locker room around the league. That's not PR. That's not damage control. That's emotional investment. And emotional investment is the difference between teams that collapse in December and teams that surge. It's the difference between talented rosters that implode and talented rosters that finally come together. When players fight for each other and for their head coach, it increases their margin for error. It keeps them locked in when fatigue hits. It makes the difference between quitting on a play or finishing it. In January, that difference changes games. So as the Steelers enter this final run, healthier, sharper, more unified, more balanced, and more confident than they've been all season. The question isn't whether they can make noise. It's whether they'll seize the moment completely and finally play the full, complete brand of football they've been building toward. We've seen flashes. We've seen growth. We've seen resilience. Now it's about stacking it into something bigger than individual weeks. And that leads us right back to you. With this team gaining momentum, leaders speaking up, the locker room pulling in the same direction, and key players returning at the perfect time. Do you think this Steelers team is about to peak when it matters most? Let me know your thoughts. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out the video that's on your screen right now. Picking up exactly where we left off, the real turning point in this entire storyline comes from what the players themselves have been saying, because you can tell this isn't a team pretending to be confident. This is a group that has absorbed every setback, every piece of criticism, every national media jab, and used it as fuel. And that's not something you can manufacture. It has to come from inside the locker room, and with this Steelers team, it clearly has. Ben Roethlisberger's insight on his podcast wasn't some nostalgic commentary from a former player disconnected from the present team. It was a direct reflection of what he recognizes as the heartbeat of this locker room. He talked about outside noise being exactly what a team needs to come together down the stretch, and you can already see that taking shape. He's been part of teams that rallied behind criticism and used it to sharpen their edge heading into January, and his point was simple. When everyone on the outside is talking good, bad, or ugly, it becomes the perfect moment for a team to circle the wagons and create that us-against-the-world mentality that often separates contenders from everyone else. And that point echoed straight through Cam Hayward's comments. Cam didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't deflect blame. He didn't pretend the criticism of Mike Tomlin wasn't real. Instead, he said that the players have to own it, that it reflects on them, and that if they want Tomlin around, and they absolutely do, then they must be the ones who elevate their performance. That's leadership. That's accountability. And it's also a clear indication that this locker room hasn't fractured under pressure. It has hardened. Cam's words weren't just about defending a coach. They were about acknowledging responsibility for the direction of the team. Then there's Alex Highsmith, whose comments might be the clearest example of where this team's mindset currently stands. Highsmith didn't talk about one game at a time in the usual cliche sense. He talked about chasing a Super Bowl. He talked about trust within the locker room. He talked about urgency being at an all-time high. He talked about not getting complacent, not getting satisfied, and making sure the team continues to stack wins. And when he spoke about Mike Tomlin's calmness through the highs and lows of the season, you could hear how much that steadiness matters to the players around him. And that point echoed straight through Cam Hayward's comments. Cam didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't deflect blame. He didn't pretend the criticism of Mike Tomlin wasn't real. Instead, he said that the players have to